Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club, Comics Masterpiece Edition for the month of August. Before I start the show today, just a little editorial note. Probably some people are aware I had a heart attack 10 days ago. I'm feeling much better. I'm still very weak, but I love talking about comics so much, and it energizes me, and it is the thing that is just the light of my life. And so I decided that I still wanted to do this, especially talking to our guest for this book. Our book this month is The Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1. And our guest is Brian Michael Bendis. Who's right there?
Hi.
Hi, how are you, sir?
Good. I'm so glad you're well. I'm so glad you're sitting there looking healthy. As we discussed, I know the feeling of going, what the hell was that?
Yeah. No, it's weird. So I'm not going to hold the book. Normally I hold the book the entire show, but I'm not going to hold the book the entire show. And hopefully if people who watch this on sequence, I'm going to start getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner as this goes on, because the plan is I'm going to lose 50, 60 pounds.
Great.
So that's
all carbs,
plan.
by the way.
It's all carbs.
This I can talk with now with some authority. I lost the weight and I kept it off. I was carb addicted. It was stress eating at the highest level with no awareness that I was doing it. I was just eating whole pies while I'm typing that book you were holding. I will say that when I lost the weight before I had my MRSA scare, and my doctor said it 100% saved my life, I would not have made it. So I tell that to everybody, not to stress them out, but just, it's the difference between life and death. So may that inspire you.
I'm very much so, and I think it's going to inspire a lot.
But here's the good news, and I know you're addicted to carbs. You think I need my carbs. Not only will you not be addicted to them anymore, you won't even want them. Like there's things that I craved with my whole heart for decades that I wouldn't touch ever. Like there's no part of it that I want now. So it does happen. Your body does say, "No, you're good with the water. Drink the water."
Yeah, exactly. I think beer's going to be a little hard because I love me beer, but we'll do it. It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
I love chicken nuggets more than you love beer, and I'm done. It's been years. So anyway, I'm just saying it not to stress you out, but that it can be done. It can be done with our lifestyle. Yes. Which so I wish you.
I take that in exactly that was intended, and I really appreciate it. And everybody out there, I really appreciate everybody. The outpouring from people has been, I had no idea. I literally had no idea.
I my takeaway from my whole thing was, my friends are way better than I thought they were. Like I never leaned on them. Other than like my wife, I never leaned that hard on them. And then I literally found out how great my friends were, and that's all I took away from it. Yeah. And I've been living with it for years now. So All right. So with all of that out of the way, let's talk about comics. And my first question, it's always the same question. Whoever I interview, it's my favorite question. Who are you?
You are obviously a man of wit, who has skill in writing a story. Of all of the things that you could be doing with that talent, why comics of all things?
Oh yeah, I feel myself very lucky in this. We've throughout this weird life's journey, we meet a lot of people in our industry, but also people in other creative industries and music and film and television, where we get to meet a lot of cool people who have all this similar thing, is something touched them when they were younger. A truth was spoken to them through a medium, and whatever medium that was, I'm like, that's it. I must. This is my road, and I would sit in my house as a young man, and comic books were giving me a feeling that once I figured out it was someone's job, then I want to give that feeling to someone. That I would like to do that. That sounds like a life journey worth it. And when you're living with that feeling from 6 years old on, you can take it for granted. Like I never had another path. like that. I'm going to do this. But then you meet other people in life that don't have that. They get to college and they still don't know what they want to do for a living. And you realize how blessed you are that I never struggled with where I needed to go. And no matter how many weird people I met in my journey and how many shitty publishers and stuff, I did not change course. I just was like, wow, look at all the crazy people. I just kept going. So,
yeah.
But I do. When I meet other like comedians or musicians or filmmakers who a film touched them, a comedian spoke a truth to them, and that's it. It's a switch gets flipped, and there's no other path.
Yeah. That's a very common answer. I hear that quite a bit.
Yeah, and when you meet other people who've had it, it's almost a relief. Like, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Was there a particular book that you remember as kind of flipping that light switch?
Yeah, I was a Marvel kid and a DC teenager. So I remember reading, like, I got into like Marvel Team Up and Avengers 186 with Red Ronin on the cover, and I think I had Avengers 149, which is the one before an anniversary issue, and everything about it was set up for the anniversary issue that I couldn't get my hands on for many years. And that anniversary issue, if I'm not mistaken, was mostly a reprint. So it was kind of a bummer when we got there. But yeah, I had a handful of comics, and I read them over and over and over and over again. And eventually one day I got to an age where I flipped to the front of the book and said, okay, who did this? It was George Perez. And I'm like, all right, I want to be George Perez. Yes. And I think I walked into my family room and said to the family, I'm going to be George Perez. And of course, no one knows what I'm talking about, but I did announce it at an early age. And then those names in the comic became like rock star names to me. There was no difference in my brain between Sting and George Perez, or John Byrne or Bruce Springsteen. It was all rock star to me, and I wanted to go to there.
Yeah. Did you have any formal training in writing or in art?
I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art. Again, at 6 years old, I declared my path and then spent every waking moment I had either reading comics or making comics or taking life drawing classes or whatever I thought I was missing in my training. I went and just did my own study. And then I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art, which is a very fancy art school in Cleveland, but it's a fine art school, not an applied or graphic arts school. So they were not interested in what I was interested in at all. And it was funny because there was a few kids there that were very into comics. And you got to remember, this is like mid 80s. Watchmen, Dark Knight, Black Orchid, Mouse, American Splendor, like the most important things happening in art and graphic design in America were happening in comic books.
Yes.
To the point where I'm sure you remember the great graphic magazine, Print Magazine, actually did it was a quarterly magazine about what's important in art, and one issue was about comics.
Yeah.
And it was probably the most mind-blowing thing I'd ever experienced. I was able to also take the magazine into my studies at the Institute of Art and point to my teacher, who did not understand the difference between like Andy Capp and Dave McKeon,
sure.
and say, look, this is how important comics are right now, and this is where we're headed. And then they just put me in the corner and to do independent study. I basically wouldn't stop whining. Yeah. About because I had a couple of semesters where I had to put my comic books away to work on my assignments.
Right.
And in my head, it felt like I could actually do the assignment as a comic book. I wanted to apply the teaching into what I wanted to do. And after a while, they just put me in the corner, let me make comics. And my first comic I published through Caliber was made in class. It was my junior thesis.
Nice.
I made my own anthology called Parts of a Whole. Do not go looking for it. And it's probably in your corner. God bless. And I did like as many different art styles as I could muster myself, as many different writing styles. And it was to prove my point that comics are all of these things. And also it was me saying, well, who am I in this? Like part of me was Frank Miller, and part of me was Howard Chaykin, and part of me was George Perez. And then there was a whole other part of me that was Mort Drucker. I was actually making a living as a caricature artist. Mm-hmm. So I was doing more caricatures during the day than anything else, and studying them all with equal passion and verve. So I did this anthology just to kind of figure out like who I was. So it took a few comic books actually to like figure out that film noir was where my brain was.
Sure. How did the teachers react to this junior thesis? Did you get a good grade?
25 years later, they gave me an honorary doctorate. I actually, what happened was I did my thesis, and it didn't matter. I remember. I don't think it went great. It didn't go badly, and I worked really hard. I always got an A for effort, even when I screwed up. They go, "Oh, you worked so hard." B-. And but I was working in a comic store. I was working. Do you know Jimmy Williams? He owns Comic Heaven in Cleveland. Have you guys ever met each other?
Yep.
Okay. Well, Jimmy is an old dear friend of mine, and we were working together at a store called Super City Comics in downtown Cleveland. And then there, a lot of the customers were friends, just like you have. And as part of my thesis, I actually sold the book in stores. I actually put it on the shelf for a couple bucks. And some of the customers pitied me and bought a copy. But then I actually ended up getting some tremendous feedback from people who weren't my mother and friends. Yeah. And a couple of customers came up and said, hey, you should send this to Caliber or Fantagraphics. This is about at the level they're publishing right now. You're ready. Yeah. And I did not see myself as ready. So, but I did. I sent it into Caliber and Fantagraphics and whoever else was publishing the black and white newsprint stuff, Slave Labor, I'm sure I sent them to. Mm-hmm. And then literally 7 months later to the day, I heard from both Fantagraphics and Caliber. Mm. And Caliber offered to publish what I had sent in as is. And I immediately said yes, so I don't have to do any work. Wow, I already did. That's amazing. And then I ended up redoing the entire thing from scratch. Because then I looked at it and went, oh, no, I can't publish this on a national stage. This is the amateur hour. So I ended up redoing all that. And then while the same thing was going on, you're going to love this. Do you remember Eros Comics at Fantagraphics?
Yeah.
All right. So so my next book is going to be a book called Quivers. And it was about Amazons that were in a sorority in college. It was all a bunch of male paranoia bullshit. I'm sure it's stupid beyond comprehension. But I said that was the next thing I was going to do. And very much in the flavor of like Martin Scorsese's After Hours. That was definitely what was, and they said they would publish it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be the same place as the Hernandez brothers? Holy crap. Yeah. And then they go, but what do you think about drawing some nipples on those girls and making it an Eros comic? And I was like, because I didn't want to do that. Yeah. And I went from I'm a peer of Love and Rockets to no, you're going to do this. And I was confused by it because I still wanted to be a fan of graphics, obviously. Yeah. And I remember I called Caliber and I said, I'm confused by it. And he goes, no, don't do that. And we'll publish it the way you want to make it. And I go, yeah, it sounds like a better, like I'm way too young to be selling out that fast. This is like my first deal. Right. Like I'll sell out later. There'll be plenty of time. So I went with Caliber, which was the right choice on a few levels. I needed to fuck up some stuff, and Caliber was the kind of company where you could, fuck up on stage. And am I allowed to swear? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, please.
Okay.
Swear all you want.
So the part about your first gigs, your first independent work is that you can mess up on stage and figure it out. And also, I immediately met like all of my best friends. I met David Mack and Mike Oming, and like I met my crew. All the same kind of creator. You know, we were kind of like stuck in the middle between independent and mainstream. Like we weren't doing independent enough and we weren't doing mainstream enough, but we're all working in what would be mainstream genre in any other medium. Like we're all doing crime fiction and action books and stuff, but because they weren't superheroes, they were considered independent, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we also we saw, okay, we're not getting any love from the Comic Buyer's Guide. We're not getting any love from the Comics Journal. So we'll just make our own little crew. And we actually made our own magazine. We were like, we'll do it ourselves. And that's when we kind of like locked arms and moved forward into comics. And then shockingly, just a few years later, almost all of us got picked for the mainstream. Either Marvel or DC picked almost all of us up. No one got left behind. It was crazy. Yeah.
No, Caliber was a pretty amazing house in a lot of ways because
it really was.
A lot of people came out of there, and
and I don't mean to speak ill of someone who's passed, but if he would have paid his bills, we would all stay.
Yeah,
like we were so in love with each other.
Yeah,
and we're all still making Caliber comics. We're just doing it in different places, right? We would all stay. We couldn't have loved the place more. And I'm deeply grateful for the years that Gary let us flail and find ourselves. Everybody needs it.
Yeah. And as you say, I mean, it has become the mainstream now, essentially.
It was like Ed Brubaker, me, Phil Hester, David Mack. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And you'd be like, oh, we were all at the same place at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think that culturally, in terms of what comics needs and is right now, I mean, we can talk about whether you agree with this or not, but it seems to me that superhero comics are in a very weird place right now.
Yeah.
They're no longer the driver of the conversation anymore. And it tends to be things that are more aimed at a real audience, not a real audience. That's totally the wrong way to put it.
I know what you mean. We're in flux right now. We have not landed where we're landing.
Exactly.
And it's funny because not to do an outstanding professional segue, but when Ultimate Spider-Man was being born, it was being born in a situation not dissimilar to this.
Yeah,
like there was a lot of industry chaos. And maybe this is the end of the road feeling for some people, and other people going, no, you can't end my road. I make comics. And so it felt a little similar. And just like that, it was unclear where we were going to land. And we ended the last one with Iron Man, the movie.
Yeah.
Which didn't look like it was going to happen. And then it happened. And who knows what the result of this will be.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're right in that we definitely always need like a place for people to find themselves, like an open mic, and web comics are that for a lot of people too. And as an educator and teacher, we push on that all the time. If I was coming in today, I would have so many web comics going at so many different places, so many different times. I would be annoying.
Yeah,
like I would overdo it. Because you can publish whatever you want. That's not something we had.
Yeah,
you had to find someone to publish your book.
Yeah. It's fascinating because we're now graduating 3 different schools worth of classes every year. People who are trained to be cartoonists in a way that really wasn't happening. But I mean, there was the Kubert School, right? But I always got the impression from the outside that you had to be a certain kind of artist to work at the Kubert, to get into the Kubert School. Right, like you had to sort of buy Kubert's house style.
Also a technical proficiency.
Yeah,
it was absolutely a one that I don't think I've ever had. That they absolutely have over there.
Yeah. Did you apply there just out of curiosity?
I did. It's a whole long story. I was accepted, but I didn't end up making it there. But it was a really, really, really big deal to me that I got accepted.
Yeah.
Like it was. Kind of like there's like benchmarks where like I don't know what I would have done. Like I needed someone to say, yeah, you're good enough to get in to make it this far.
Yeah.
And even though I couldn't make it happen, it propelled me forward.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel like I was tricking myself. If that makes sense.
So, I I mean, you started
and I
off
think about how different my career would have been if I would have gone there. It would have been a whole different career.
Sure.
And me and Alex would have been Alex Maleev would have been classmates there, and we would have killed each other instead of having this lifelong partnership.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious, and this is, we can kind of segue to Ultimate Spider-Man with this as well. You were a cartoonist. You were a writer and an artist.
Yeah.
You were even, there was a couple of Caliber books where you were drawing somebody else's script, just as an artist. I am
There's a Star Trek Deep Space Nine with my name on it as pencil.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So I am really interested in the pivot to becoming a writer primarily, and whether that was difficult for you to make that jump.
The simplest answer is that I started writing to give myself something to draw. I had spent most of my childhood and into the 80s drawing whatever I could find. Like if you find a script sample, or even I was drawing, I was adapting the Marvel novels. Remember they put out these pocketbook novels like Avengers and Iron Man? I would use them as script and draw whole Avengers graphic novels. And eventually, as you get older and I'm working in the comic store and I'm doing more like active studying, and I'm seeing that, Frank Miller is writing his own stuff, right? And maybe I should do that too. And like a lot of my favorite creators were becoming franchise whole players, like Walt Simonson too. Everyone was becoming a full-fledged creator, so it just seemed that that's a path. And at the same time, I discovered that what I was really loving was film noir and the language of film noir, the visual language of film noir. There was a documentary I saw in an art house. You can see it on YouTube now, called Visions of Light. I highly recommend it. It's from the American Cinematographers Institute. And it takes you basically up through the 90s about the art of cinematography. And the art of cinematography and the art of comic book storytelling have a very tight Venn diagram. And it was a really religious experience for me, because one of the segments in the movie is about John Alton, who invented the visual language of film noir. It did not exist before him, and he made it something that we can all look to. And then I realized that not only did I love that, I was already drawing that. I was already writing and drawing film noir, and I just didn't know what it was. And I literally stood up in the theater like it was a revival, like I'm like Jake Elwood Blues and the Blues Brothers. Like the light hit me, and I was like, oh my God! Because I remember the line was, in film noir, you're not afraid of the white, you're not afraid of the darkness, you're afraid of the light.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's it. That's my religion now. And so I started working on Goldfish and Jinx and Torso. All came out of that. And it did make me feel like I was being very true to myself in genre. I was being very true to myself with my heroes, like Martin Scorsese, like all the people who I loved were doing work like this. David Mamet was doing House of Games. So there was a lot of my heroes and people who were speaking to me were working in this genre too. So I just started writing to give myself something to draw. And then I'm like, oh, I'm a writer. I got to go do research. And then I'm like, and as hard as art can be for me, the act of writing felt like a fluid thing. Like, and I won't say easy, because it isn't, but it was coming out of me in a more fluid way, much like the way you see like Mike Mignola or Alex Ross or Jim Lee sit down and draw, and it just seems to pour out of them in a way like it just there's no other way it could happen. Writing art never felt that way to me, but the writing felt that way to me. And story decisions, and how to craft a story. So I started doing that now. What I did not know was that I was preparing myself for the next 20 years. I did not see that coming until Joe Quesada told me. Yeah, that's the path that I.
Interesting, because I mean, I very vividly remember Goldfish and Jinx coming out at the time, and thinking, wow, these are great books. I mean, and obviously from the writing as well. But you were a good artist. I thought. I thought, I'm
a pretty decent designer. I my page designs. I'm really a student of Matt Wagner and other artists who really. There's no. there's certain artists that the page looks like it has a million ways it could break up, and I studied them tremendously, and what I thought I lacked in craft, I could make up for in ingenuity, right? Yeah. So that's where I got a lot of my inspiration.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, I smartly, wisely, in my self-teaching, looked to outside of comics. I had another good moment with another documentary where Sting talked about that rock and roll is a bastard medium, that there's nothing that actually is rock and roll. It's a medium that needs you to reach out of it and pull something into it, yeah. Be it opera or jazz or anything, elevates that to something else. When he said that, I realized that comic books are the same thing. And I think I'd seen a Will Eisner quote that basically it says the same thing, but with different language. Yeah. That comics, you need to reach out of comics and pull stuff in. So I was pulling playwriting in and cinematography and all these other things that were really, really, really getting under my skin and applying them immediately to my comic book page. And that was the right thing to do. And again, some things I did were wrong. That was the right one. And that kept me on an honest path through most of my work. But yeah, thank you. And also, I didn't know what was writing and what was art. Like, it was all storytelling. Like even after I was hired to write stuff, I would end up drawing a lot of it myself and showing it to the artist, because I didn't know where the writing stopped. Yeah. So that part took a while for me.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because I am hard pressed to think of very many people who started as cartoonists and then essentially became full-time writers and more or less never drew again. I mean, I'm sure you still doodle, right? But
I draw all the time. Yeah. I used to joke. I used to say I'm also Jeff Lemire. That's my pen name. I also do work under Jeff Lemire. But
one of the few others, maybe Matt Kint.
No, there's a few. We are in Ed Brubaker was
it's a small club though.
Yeah, it's a small club and it's a weird club and I think about it, but it's always cool. It's always like it's always in my back pocket. If everything burns to the ground, I can go sit and write and draw a graphic novel. And that's cool. That's a very freeing feeling, to be honest. Yeah. And I've kept that with me, like literally since Ultimate Spider-Man #1. I'm like, well, this is all going to go to hell, and then I'll go back and draw another graphic novel. It's just, but in the meantime, I keep getting paired up with all these amazing artists. Like and if art was such a struggle for me, and I was trying to draw like Alex Maleev, like that, I was headed towards that route, and it was such a struggle. And then I met Alex, and I'm like, well, I could just have him do it, and he likes to do it, and he does it better than me, and we like each other, and he always does it like so. It was hard to go back to drawing if I'm surrounded by Mike Oeming and Alex Maleev and all these other people that are making my life easier and calmer than what my life was sitting over the drawing table. Yeah.
I'm assuming that the Caliber years while you were productive were probably not financially amazing. Is that a correct assumption?
Man, it's independent. I describe it to people who don't understand. It's a lot like independent film or starting your band before you get signed, or even if you're like signed to a mini label, you got to tour, you got to hustle, right? It's not written in stone that you're going to have a hit. It's all you got to. So we weren't. My first book, the first issue of Goldfish, sold 800 copies.
Wow! Yeah.
Nationwide.
Yeah.
And I somehow was able to break even with that. That's how the finances were, on newsprint. Sure. But most of the time we were selling around, 3,000, 4,000, and it was just enough to like get you a table at a show and travel around and do some tours and stuff like that. But I was making most of my living as a character artist. I would be lucky enough to book a couple of gigs on the weekend, and for character you get paid like $75 an hour, 1993 money, right? So if you get like a couple bar mitzvahs and a wedding, like I can spend the rest of my week just doing jinx. I remember that was my overall lifestyle goal for many years.
Yeah.
Get a couple of sweet gigs and then just spend the rest of the week eating ramen noodles and drawing jinx for nobody but yourself.
Yeah.
And then slowly but surely the numbers kept going up because nice people like you were like sliding them across the table to customers who were looking for stuff. And also, even though myself and like David Lapham and a couple other people who were doing crime comics and Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka, we had all started the year before Frank started Sin City, but no one cared. And then Sin City came out and made that flavor more appealing to some readers who he helped them discover like pure film noir love. And then there was all kinds of articles about like me and Lapham and Rucka all together. Like the first time I was in Wizard magazine was like I think me and Azzarello, and we're all just doing crime comics and happily basking in Frank's shadow because it was like 400 more readers than we had before, right? And so then from there, things started slowly clicking. There was like an article in Spin magazine, and like every once in a while something really nice would happen, and then and even though I was starving to death, we were having a great time. Yeah. And we're making comics, we're making stuff we believe in, and there was always just enough hustle to make it worth. There was always something, a little bit going on in the business where it was like, it never occurred to us not to do it.
Yeah. Jordan tells me we've got a couple questions. I'm happy to take any audience questions, but let's keep it right to the second to early days of struggle. So great.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer anything.
Yeah. So what was your most formative failure while working on developing your craft? That's actually a really good question.
I might be in the middle of it right now. I don't know. I'm so glad you brought it up. I do talk about failure quite a lot in class as well. I think we're in a weird place in our culture where everyone's trying to like make themselves look perfect on Instagram and no flaws anywhere. But that's not how it works. That's not how the world works. And failure is a big part of the creative lifestyle. And you can figure everything out and do everything right. And then the next project just completely screw it up. And with the best intentions. But you learn from those failures. You learn what kind of person you are, what kind of character you have, whether or not you're the kind of person that can get off the mat once you've failed. So the failures were very commercial. Like we weren't selling anything to anybody. So every time you put out a book just to break even, they don't feel great. It doesn't. You got to remember, we're working on these comics. And if I'm doing like an issue of Jinx, I'm writing, I'm drawing, I'm lettering it, I'm book designing it. It's all me. There's nobody else. And then you put it out and nobody cares. It does. It feels like nobody cares. It feels like failure, but it feels like glorious failure because you did it. You made your book and it's there. And so the other things I would say that I would have some fear. Some things I would be shockingly unafraid of, almost to the point where you wonder what's wrong with me. And then other things, that's fear. That's fear messing with you, right? And failure can bring a lot of fear because I don't like that feeling. I don't want to do that again. But then you realize, no, there's no other way to do it. You have to put your hand in the buzzsaw and see if you got it. So I think just the general sense of surviving all the failure was the lesson. I was very proud of that. I'm very proud of all my friends who did it as well. And also, I must say, and I love when people want to give me some business online. They can never give me shit about me paying my dues. Yeah. Paid them. Paid in full. Paid in full. So like even when I came to DC.
So, if you're the right type of personality, it sets a fire under you to. Yeah. You kind of need to fail in order to succeed.
Yeah, and I remember there's been a couple of times where I've just like even like modern, like in regular stuff, like when they canceled Powers, the TV show, even after they told us it was picked up for a third season, that really hurt my feelings a great deal. And I really remember like being like lying on the ground upset. And then like 40. I'm thinking I'm just not going to write or draw anything this week. I'm just going to be miserable. I'm just going to be dizzy. And then 45 minutes later, I was writing. And okay, I'm that guy. All right.
Yeah. So okay, so early years of struggle, and you had a couple successes, obviously.
And again, struggle is such a hard word because you're with all your friends.
Oh, sure.
You're all struggling together. It never feels like struggle. It just feels like you're hanging out with your buddies, and instead of getting drunk in a bar, we're making comics together.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, no. I get that, but I'm just trying to set the stage here of
Yes.
You'd been working at Caliber, you were doing stuff that was successful enough to let you keep doing comics, but not successful enough for you to really move forward. I
was drawing characters throughout the entire crafting of that graphic novel you were just talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you got McFarlane gave you the gig to write Sam and Twitch.
Yes.
And so you're moving up, but then you get a call at one point for hey, come to work at Marvel Comics. That's a lot better than Sam and Twitch. I gotta imagine, right? That feeling.
Sam and Twitch was a great gig. Sam and Twitch. If there was a I guess this speaks to the earlier question. This actually is the answer to the previous question. My biggest failure at that time was my inability to see the value of full collaboration.
Yeah.
Like I had a lot of friends that I worked with and a lot of people I was close to creatively, but this was I am now collaborating, and I drew a version of every issue of Sam and Twitch and then handed it to the artists, Angel and Alex, and because I wasn't being rude to them. I didn't know that wasn't the job. I thought the job was to give everyone as much information as you could give. So only after I met Mr. Bagley. And he, with his lovely Georgia Southern gentleman way, called me up and said, "Hey, that's my job."
Yeah.
Did I realize I was embarrassing myself tremendously with these other artists?
You were like giving them a penciled version.
I was literally elaborate thumbnails. Elaborate thumbnails, and not letting them make any choices. Literally, and in my language, you can see it in the earliest issues of Jessica Jones. You can see it in the Sam and Twitches that I did with Alex. If you compare the Sam and Twitches me and Alex did, and then I learned the lesson, actually thanks to Todd, for when we were ready to do Daredevil. Yeah. Because after I was fired off of Sam and Twitch, Todd took over. Yeah. And Alex went from a megalomaniac who was writing and drawing the whole book and handing it over. Todd would call up Alex and dictate a story to him. There wasn't even a script.
Yeah.
So it was like, 4 pages of a gunfight and blah, blah. And then Alex would tell me this. He was having whiplash. It was like a completely different environment. And then I would see the final result that Alex was doing and realize how much I had embarrassed myself giving him all these layouts. So I was basically had him in a headlock that he was fine with. But it doesn't make it fine. It was wrong. So when we got to Daredevil, it was like open season. I had practiced enough. And gotten to where I needed to go.
Yeah. So okay, let's talk about getting that call to write Spider-Man. And it's not just you're getting a call to write Marvel Comics. It's not like they offer you the vision, right? Or something else, which I'm sure you would have been.
They did kind of
anything.
So here's what happened. So David got the call first. David Mack got the call, and he was working on Daredevil with Joe Quesada. I am a huge fan of Joe's artwork, probably one of my favorite comic artists of all time. And regardless of him running the place or not, I just loved his stuff. And David was working with him and having a great time. And I had met Joe through David, and I was kind of saying to David, "Hey, show him my shit." Like, well, everyone does it. Like, hey, show my stuff. And eventually, David was in a position to show him my stuff. And Joe was very taken with it and called up. And there was stuff going on behind the scenes at Marvel that I didn't realize that like my kind of voice was the answer for. They had some people just writing in fear, and I had exercised all my fear. And so they called me up and said, "If I brought you to Marvel, what would you do?" And it was the call. And I said what everyone says. Doctor Strange, Nick Fury. There's like a list of characters that every artist calls with, and at the time they were no-go characters. But something about Nick Fury, they said yes to, and it was me and David. We're going to do a prestige format Marvel Knights Nick Fury series with Bill Sienkiewicz, who was friends with David, and now we were getting to know each other, and we couldn't believe it. Now we went from nothing to prestige format Nick Fury. Bill Sienkiewicz graphic novel.
Yeah. And
that didn't happen because we got a little ahead of ourselves and we went to Steranko to get him involved, and that just screwed it all up. And it's a very funny Steranko story, but it's his business, so I'll keep it to him. But he had made a demand that was so over the top that it was hilarious. And I had to go back to Joe, who I barely knew, and say, "Well, Jim said he's in, but," and it caused so much chaos that the whole project died. And I went, "Oh, back to the line I go, back to the back of the line." Right. And instead, the next day, but in this interim of building the Nick Fury thing, Joe and David, and we all were really liking each other, and I could tell I was a bit of a different energy than what was going on at Marvel. And Joe called up and said, "Hey, listen, could you do me a favor? Could you take over Daredevil for a while? We're having some real scheduling problems. You know, Kevin Smith was making movies while he was writing it, and the book was an enormous hit, and it wasn't shipping. So could you come in and do a few issues of Daredevil for me as a favor, and I'll make it up to you?" And I'm like, "How is this a favor to you?" And would you and your best friend do Daredevil together? Is not a favor. And so we started working on Daredevil. And at this time, I had really gotten some punk rock juice in my head. And I was like, I'm not giving them what they want. I don't care. I'm going to write my soul. And if they like it, they'll publish it. And if they don't, they won't. And that's it. And I wrote those first issues of Daredevil Wake Up for David. And also I'm writing for David, who is one of my best friends and probably the person I'm most connected to creatively, even though I can't do anything that he does. I can't do it, but I know where it's coming from as much as I know where my stuff is coming from. So I was able to write not only towards his strengths, but stuff that I knew he could do that he wasn't doing for himself yet, right? And so I kind of like went that direction. And when I handed it in and was fully ready for them to not publish them or put me in the back of the line or kill Femi, and instead I got the call, "Hey, are you a fan of Spider-Man?" And I was like, "Why? What's up?" They go, "Well, we were working on this thing where we wanted to start Spider-Man over from scratch, and we were working on it for a while, and it is not coming together." And I just and while I was reading your Daredevil script, Bill Jemas came into the room and said, "We need a voice that does characters, and and they thought of me, and just the fact that that's what Joe saw in my work was such a relief, because I had a million false starts and submissions and packages I had sent to every editor in the world, and to like everybody, and no answer. And then and I really just wanted someone to see that I think I can write anything if I'm given the chance. I write characters, not just gangsters. And so he called me up and said, it was called Ground Zero Comics, which would have been a bad label. And they said, "You want to take it for a spin?" And I said, "Can I see what the other person did?" And another writer had already had a shot at it. And the other writer did what any writer would have done, which was look at Amazing Fantasy 15 as a perfect piece of fiction that doesn't need any adjustments, and did, an adaptation of it that you remember when they remade Psycho? Gus Van Sant remade Psycho.
Sure, shot for shot.
And you're kind of like, oh, that's fascinating, but it doesn't bring any truth to the party. It's as close as, it's not exactly like that, but it's as close as I can put out there to people to, if you've seen it, it was a lot like that. It was like a cover song that wasn't better than it was trying to be too exact. Like, you love a good cover song that adds a little something to it. Right. And I was so grateful to that writer, and I don't mean in any kind of false compliment. I would have done exactly what he did. Stan is one of my, godfathers or something. I wouldn't have been able to do that, but I saw him make that choice, and then I read an article where Stan said that one of his biggest frustrations is that he only had 11 pages to do Amazing Fantasy 15, that he wished he had many issues to tell that story. Oh. And that was like, oh, then that's what we're going to do. We are going to do the way Stan wanted it to do, which is tell it longer and really unfold it. And that kind of like freed me to try to top it if without trying to top it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it does very much.
Completely different language. I can tell the story.
It's interesting because, at the end of issue 1, he's not Spider-Man at all. He's kind of not even close to being Spider. Not
in costume. He's on the ceiling. That's it, right? And I remember I handed it in. It's not what I said I was going to hand in. I had written up a proposal. It was very clearly laid out, but the characters took over in the best way possible. The scenes were flowing. And I said, and I did, I rolled the dice one more time. I just handed it in. I said, I know this isn't what I said, but read it and let's talk. I'm not saying, let's just, and then Bill Jemas read it and goes, that's what I wanted. I'm like, oh, great, fantastic. And we were off to the races. Literally, they called up and said, now do it to X-Men. And then now in my, now I'm older, I know that the only good response to handing in a script is them offering you more work.
Right.
It's like that's the compliment. And so I look back at all that as, oh my God, after literally a solid decade of near misses and tries and almosts, I was hitting those wins. I was the right person at the right place at the right time. Yeah. And the other things that I didn't get, the other like submissions, I was not the right person. I wasn't ready. Like I remember I had this whole like thing I was going to do, remember there was a Marvel West?
Yeah.
All right. So my first Marvel comic was actually at Marvel West. I actually wrote the last Ultraverse comic called Angels of Destruction. Right. And it's terrible. Don't buy it. And but it's got a Soriyama cover. It's a very strange book. And it was originally supposed to be like an all-star indie like anthology, and it was going to be me and David Lapham and a bunch of other creators, and it ended up not being that exactly. Yeah. But again, it was one of those. All right, you did a moderately good job, but you didn't do anything special with it. That's what it feels like. Don't do it again.
Yeah, yeah.
So there were other projects at Marvel West, and the Marvel West went away. I would not have, my career would have been very different if I would have done those. I wasn't ready. I was ready, and I needed Joe, and Bill Jemas is crazy, and I needed that group of people, and I needed Marvel to be in bankruptcy, and for them to be that desperate. Like all those things had to come together for it to be the right place at the right time. Right.
Yeah, no, there
were people.
Certainly butted heads with Bill Jemas many times over many of the decisions that were made there. And, to the point.
And I never did. We got along amazing. And I was always like, why does he like me? Because there's other artists and writers that he didn't care for.
Right.
Whose work I admire a great deal. And I would bring up and he'd go, oh, that guy. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm trying to get you to see we're the same kind of guy. Like, I don't know why you like me and Mark Millar and not these people. Like, so, but it was really a great experience from top to bottom being there. And also I bring up the bankruptcy part because that's a huge component of this.
Absolutely.
People can't, I remember it gets crazier as the years go on that Marvel was ever in bankruptcy with the assets in their toy box.
Sure.
How can you go bankrupt if you have Spider-Man? It seems just alone. So they were done. Our first visit to the offices for Ultimate Spider-Man, the lights were off to save money, and they had sold a bunch of filing cabinets. They were piled up in the corner with a Post-it note that said "sold."
Right.
And if like you and I grew up reading Stanley's bullpen bulletins. The bullpen seemed like a rockin' It was like Haight Ashbury. Like it's like, there's some shit going down there. You want to be there. And so when you walk in, it was like crickets. You're like, ooh, am I writing the last Marvel comic? And that thought was in my head.
Yeah.
Is this the end of the road? And I'm so glad I got in just at the end.
It seemed like it too at the time. I mean, except for Marvel Knights, the main Marvel line was terrible at that time. Just terrible. The books were not working creatively, and
it was a weird time. I can't, like anything, like people always say, oh man, movies in the 70s were the best. No, those 6 movies were the best. There's also a lot of shit that came out that year too. So every generation, every company, there's always good stuff and bad stuff. There always is. And what you're talking about is the bad stuff needs to be good and the good stuff needs to be bad is usually.
Marvel at that time was that period where they seem to think, oh, Image is succeeding, so we should copy all of the things that Image was doing without understanding why any of that was what the audience for Image wanted at that moment.
Yeah, and regardless, and those Image voice, but that happens all the time in comics. And we always want to say, the thing you're stealing or trying to imitate, you're imitating the wrong part.
Right.
You don't want to imitate their style. Their style is coming from inside of them. You want to get to the point, you want to steal the part where they can get that inside themselves,
right?
To find themselves. That's the part you want to steal, right? Yeah. And that's a hard lesson to learn for some people. And also when there's so much money flowing on one side and not on the other, people tend to go, oh, everybody wants orange, I'll make it orange.
Yeah.
But you learn quickly that is not a good road. That road doesn't work ever. It never does. Oh, a Walking Dead's a hit, I'll do zombies. No, Walking Dead's a hit because of where it came from.
Right, exactly.
And so you may get a little knockoff royalties or something from it, some of those X books that were copying Image books at the time.
Sure.
Were selling and made those people money, but they weren't being what they needed to be, which is a good comic.
And they weren't engaging the audience despite selling. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And also there are some books that weren't engaging the audience at the moment, but are now. Like they found, sometimes it takes a few years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it was a weird Marvel to walk into. It was a Marvel in flux. It was a Marvel that could have gone either way. If the Spider-Man movie wouldn't open, there's all the what ifs are. Oh, Blade made money. We get to keep the doors open.
Right.
Spider-Man made money. We get to keep the doors open. Like it was that weird, but it was also them finding out who they are as a company in the 21st century. Like what do you have to offer these people now that they can play video games? What do you have? So it was coming up with the right compelling story. And Bill was very right. There was a lot of people that didn't know where to start. Sometimes you just need a starting place, and so, all right, here's a Spider-Man #1 and an X-Men #1, and you don't have to have read anything else. Yeah. And if you like how this feels, that was 100% the right move. And the other right move was he shoved some version of Ultimate Spider-Man into anything he could find. Yeah. Payless shoes, like anywhere, some of them were 8-page versions, some of them were 16-page versions, but I kept getting calls to re-edit my work. It was nice they let me do the edit myself, so it wasn't like choppy. But like this one's for Payless and it's 12 pages long. All right, let me see what I can do. Yeah. And that was, again, not every single person then became a comic book fan, but that outreach program is an enormous, and we need them now. We need outreach programs all the time to keep people invested.
Sure.
The DCYA line is, I think, an outstanding outreach program.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I don't know if it is, but I think it is.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely agree with that. At the time, I didn't think that Ultimate Spider-Man was going to succeed, but the reason was because outreach only lasts for a certain amount of time, right? Like once you hit issue number 13, you're no longer new at that point, right? Because of the periodical nature of comics, it wasn't stores were stocking 13 issues of a book on the stands, right? Like you stock 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And so I thought from that point of view, it wasn't going to work. To the point where I even wrote a big, long public message about how this isn't going to succeed. And, if it hits issue 100, I'll eat a bug. And eventually it hit
50. I think it was 50. Was it 50?
No, I was 100. It was 100.
Okay.
Hit issue 100. And I'll eat a bug if it hits issue 100. And then Jordan's going to show the picture that I ate that bug. Because you did it. You proved me wrong for sure. You and Bill both proved me wrong. So hats off to you for that.
Well, to be fair to you though, you got to remember there was other elements in your head back then. Sure. I was not laser focused on what was going on in mainstream comics at the time that I joined. So I was vaguely unaware of what John Byrne's Chapter 1 was. Like I knew what it was, but I kind of was taking a John Byrne break at the time, and. So I didn't know that Marvel had on paper done this already,
right?
Recently,
sure.
So when we announced this idea, a lot of people, not just you, most of the industry. I remember there was some article on comic book comic resources where everybody was dumping on it from every walk of the industry. Everyone was shitting in our mouths except for Mark Millar, who I did not know. Never met the guy. He was the only one who goes, hey, it sounds like a great idea. But I remember it was the first time in my career that everyone was shitting on something without having seen even a drawing. They were just, the idea of it was no. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is a weird feeling. But I will say I had the tremendous experience, and it's very, very, very rare, of the book coming out and a lot of people about facing on when they saw our honesty, they apologized, and I was amazed by that, and then thought that would happen all the time. But no, that does not happen.
That one, I'm sure.
No, but it was lovely, and then I met Mark, and then when I was screwing up Ultimate X-Men, and then Mark was the guy to do it for sure.
Yeah. Jordan tells me we have a question.
Sure.
Is there a specific change to the origin or the character that you are the most proud of?
Yes, getting to know Uncle Ben. So in the original version, he shows up for a panel, rubs his hair, eats a flapjack, and then he's dead. And we only know how important he is to Peter from Peter's reaction, which would be a normal reaction. But I thought, what a grand opportunity to express what their family dynamic is really like, and really get to meet him and get to feel the loss when it happens. And we were getting to a point where, because I think he dies in issue 4 or 5, where people were like, oh, they're not going to kill Uncle Ben. I remember I was getting email like, oh, congratulations on not doing that. And they thought, oh, you're definitely going to kill Aunt May. That's what you're going to do. You're going to kill Aunt May. So we actually ended up, for some of the audience who's reading it, they've never read Spider-Man before, and it was all new to them. And there's some of the audience who's very, very immersed in Spider-Man, and we're very curious to see the choices we were going to make. And I remember even some people being very disappointed that we killed Uncle Ben because they thought it was like the obvious choice. And I'm like, yeah, but no, that's not the obvious choice. It's the story of Spider-Man. There's no other truth. Like changing it just immediately changes the story. It's the story about him and his aunt. Oh, yeah. So spending time with them, and also aging down Aunt May, so she could have a life and be a vital part of it, was something I was very proud of. I didn't take it Marissa Tomei far enough, but I'm glad where we took it.
Yeah. Did you at any point here in these sort of early issues, did you hear from Stan at all?
Well, see, that was a very weird time for me, because a lot of it now I look back and I go, what were you thinking? And it was it never even occurred to me that anyone else in comics would ever see my work or know my name. And even when I was working on Spider-Man, it never occurred to me that Stan would see it or care. And then what happened was Mike Cotton, who is editor of DC now, but was working at Wizard at the time, he called me up to interview me and said, we're doing a piece on Ultimate Spider-Man. Do you want to hear what John Romita Sr. had to say? And I froze because I go, do I? He goes, oh, he loved it. And I go, oh, that's such a relief. What a nice man. Because he could have not loved it too. He could have said, who the hell do you think you are? Sure. And then Mike goes, and you want to hear what Stan thought? And I'm like, well, if he opened with John Romita liked it, this isn't going to go well. And to my shock, Stan was all in from day one. Couldn't wait to talk to me, couldn't wait to meet, and was kind to me to the day he passed. Was unbelievably cool to me. And I, we weren't like best friends or anything, but I think about often if I was in his position, what I would do, how I would do it, and his generosity towards me propelled me. It inspired me to go forward. And again, when Stan goes, keep going. All right, that's. I don't care what anyone else thinks. It also made me not care what anyone else thinks.
Yeah,
I really like. It's not like in an arrogant way, but in a like. There's got to be a point where you stop torturing yourself. Stan saying, "Good job." You can stop torturing yourself.
Yeah. No, I understand. Stan was a lot more gracious of a person, I think, than maybe his reputation in many ways, these days is.
He privately sat me down and told me to
column, and I read a retelling column. It was Comic Retailer magazine, and I wrote something about Marvel had done something to piss me off, and this is probably during the bankruptcy, actually, when Stan wasn't even involved in the company anymore at that moment in time. And I said something like, if only just Marvel would just apologize, because Chemis was doing a lot of really weird stuff then, like, oh, you can't get reorders, and just like screwing with the sort of the foundational of how we do business. There's so many parallels to today, and that's a different conversation. And out of the blue, Stan called me up, and as I said, he wasn't even at Marvel Comics, and he called me up and he said, I want to apologize to you on behalf of Marvel Comics. And I was stunned, and it made my week, probably for like 2 months, I was a lot less harsh of a critic on Marvel. And then I went back to what I normally am, of course. But yeah, no, that always struck with me that he cared about Marvel Comics in a way that, you kind of get this distant impression of just him as being, well, funky Flashman, I guess, like that salesman, and that he didn't necessarily care, but no, he cared in a really fundamental way.
I can't recommend the Danny Fingeroth Stan Lee biography enough. It came out this year. I've read a lot of biographies about Stan and Jack, and I'm literally right in the middle of the new Jack one that just came out. And I am deeply fascinated by these flawed gentlemen, and Stan did seem to go through a period where he wasn't as generous, and then figured it out, right? And became the Stan we wanted him to be. Yeah. By the time I had met him, he was that man, and he had said to Joe early on, it was very empowering to Joe. And Joe said it to me, and then I actually wanted Stan to say it to me as well. That he said, it's so funny that everyone's so reverent about our work, about our early, everyone keeps going back to this first years of Marvel and being so reverent. He goes, if I was still editor-in-chief, I don't think you guys would even recognize Marvel Comics. Right. We were changing shit up so fast and getting bored and wanting to try new things, and then brought up like Avengers 16. We threw out the Avengers. Not because they weren't selling, just because we want to try new stuff. Yeah. And that he said it in like, so I empower you to go nuts. Like do that. That's what I want to happen. And that was a very amazing, cool thing to say to us. Yeah. And I did when I left Marvel, not that I'm the same as him, but I knew there were a handful of creators that were taking over the reins of Jessica Jones and Miles Morales and other books that I had very deep hooks into. And I went out of my way to say, you know what would I to repeat the story that Stan had said this to me, and it empowered me. And I knew that he meant it, that he wasn't just saying it to be cool, but may I say it to you. You know what would make me really happy is if I opened up Newsram in a couple of weeks and my first instinct was, what are they doing to Miles? Holy shit. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see my stuff spinning on a gerbil wheel. I want you to go crazy. And I was so grateful that they did. So grateful.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I will say on the flip side, I've told this story a couple of times because it was pretty rattling to me. I had gotten, Stan had reached out to have lunch a few times, and I would go through waves where I felt I was not worthy of such a thing, and say no, thank you. And not, I know it sounds crazy, and I'm really, you're talking about things you regret. Diana Schutz going, come have lunch with me and Will Eisner. And I was like, and I was horrified. And then he passed away, and I was like, what an idiot! He literally asked you to lunch.
Yeah.
What more did you want from the man? And you said no, right? And then Stan, I got throughout the years, always very, very kind and generous. And then was like, hey, let's have lunch. And then right after Will had passed, he had reached out to have lunch. And I went, yes, and flew into, it would be like, I would come into California and see certain people. I flew in specifically to go to the Cheesecake Factory with Stan to make up for the idiocy of me not having lunch with Will Eisner. And Stan showed up, sat down, and at this time he had told me he was pretty much blind and deaf, and comics were not part of his life. Yeah. So he would be told what was going on, right? And he sat down and goes, hey, is Norman Osborn running the Avengers? And I went, well, because he said it in, if you don't have a good answer to this question, I might leave.
Right.
And I went, you're the one that told me to fuck it all up. Yeah, but I did. But I did, as the Dark Avengers storyline, I did express where it came from and where it was going, and that it was only like a journey forward, and that the Avengers were going to come back with John Romita Jr. And he went, okay, let's have lunch. Like that, and then he ordered, but I was like, oh shit, if I didn't answer that right, were you leaving? Holy shit. So yeah. But it was during those lunches and stuff where I got to know him a little bit better, like the real person, and it was very cool.
Fantastic. Let's talk a minute about your co-conspirator on this, Mark Bagley.
Yes.
What was this experience like? Because here you go. Here's the guy who drew How to Draw Comics. Or who broke in through the tryout book or whatever. I got such a class.
And I was one of the people that did not break out through the tryout book, so I already hated him. So I went through a wave where if anybody had anything that I wanted that I didn't get, then I hate them. Yeah. But no, it was Bagley, and I remember Mike Allred was someone who I had a lot of misspent aggression on, only because they were very good at their jobs and I was not. So Bill Jemas thought to team up me and Mark Bagley, and it was a brilliant casting. For editors, one of the magic things an editor does is casting, and like movies and TV, if you do that right, you can then sit back and enjoy, right? And Bill's idea was, I was a head full of indie comics steam, and everyone would go to hell. And Mark Bagley was the most mainstream guy, right? So he goes, I bet right in the middle is something special, and put us together. And we didn't know each other at all. I never met him at a show, never even a phone call. We couldn't be more different. And it was one of the very first times that I was teamed up with someone who I didn't have some kind of friendship with or some kind of history with. Like even by the time I started working at Marvel Knights, Joe and I had become friendly. Like we were pals of getting to know each other. And with he'd already drawn me in Daredevil during his run with David Mack. And so we teamed up, and I got on the phone with Bagley, and little did I understand that he had already done an enormous run on Spider-Man. And already done more than most people have who've been lucky enough to work on the book had already done, and was kind of trying to figure out what he was supposed to be doing next with his career, and was having a bit of a hard time at Marvel. Like they were giving him a lot of trading cards and stuff, and not like the sweet gig he deserves. And then they teamed us together, and he felt like this was not a good gig, like it was some other damn gig. I thought it was the gig of a lifetime. Yeah. It was Cliff Biggers, fellow retailer Cliff Biggers, who told Mark, "No, you should do this. This is the Brian's the right guy, and you should." And I didn't know Cliff, but he liked the sound of it. And at the time, it was only a 6-issue miniseries. Yeah. It was all of them were 6 or 7 issue miniseries, and I had tried something with Todd that worked, because Sandwich Twitch was also a 4-issue miniseries. And I said to him, "Hey, why don't we just, are we enjoying this?" And he said, "Yeah, I've always wanted this book." And I go, "Well, why don't we just keep going with it? And if it tanks, it'll tank. And if it doesn't, it doesn't." And I'm saying it like I'm being some pal to everybody, but really I'm just trying to keep the monthly gig going. Yeah. I'm just trying to keep the paychecks flowing. Sure. Because I've never had them before. And with Todd, it worked. He went, "Yeah, let's keep it going." And I forget how many issues I ended up doing, but it was a few, and more than I was scheduled for. And then I did it on Ultimate Spider-Man again. I said, "You're doing all the Payless shoes and all the marketing and all this stuff." I said, "Why don't we just keep going and until no one wants it?" And they said, "You know what? That actually is a good idea." And I went, "I can't. Does that work? Can you just do that?" So I always tell that story, because if I can get any other freelancer to try it and get it to work, I know it will help pay their bills. It does not work. I don't know why it worked for me twice. Right. But do try. It might work. Yeah. Yeah. But so we got teamed up, and Bagley was in and out at 6. He was not going to stay. He was a little frustrated with it. But by the time we got through the first issue, and he saw it was a very different job than the Amazing Spider-Man that he had done, and I was asking more of him. Also, I was able to see, boy, he's a very good character actor. He's very good at emotion and subtext. And subtext is a thing that's very hard for a lot of comic creators. That's why so many comics are woo, because that's where what you can get. But looking into a character's eyes and seeing that they're thinking differently than what they're saying. Yeah. Like there's only a handful of people that can do that. And no one was asking Mark to do it. And then but slowly in the classroom scenes, like, well, there's a lot going on here. And then I called him up and I go, do you want to, like am I making you happy with these scenes? Like, is this inspiring you? And it was. And then he called me up and then I said, "Well, will you stay and be part of the book?" And then Cliff convinced him to stay. And then he said, "I'm going to stay, but I just want you to know I'm never going to draw Spider-Man the way he's ever been drawn by anybody else, including myself. I feel the obligation to like pivot that camera, even if it's like a classic Spider-Man pose. I'm going to turn it 15 degrees. Yeah. I'm going to show it from different." And I'm like, "Dude, you are speaking. That is all I want to hear. You're going to take it as far as you can go, any chance you can. Then I'm going to do the same." And so my obligation, really, because I loved working with him so much, was like, well, let's see how long I can keep Bagley on this book. That was like, how long can I keep, once the book was a hit, which I'd never had before, and acclimated to what that felt like. I kept him for 111 issues. I feel very good about that.
Yeah, and it was an unbroken run, right?
Yep, unbroken. 100. We beat Stan and Jack's FF run, except that they created the Marvel Universe in their run, where we told some Spider-Man stories. But unbroken, and at the point, and this is something you can either hate or love me for. I was so fast, and Bagley was so fast, and we were so shocked that it was working that we were banking issues. We were like 10, 11, 12 issues ahead of publishing, which in publishing is almost never the case. I mean, exactly. Never the case. And also it was unique for Ultimate Spider-Man because there really wasn't a shared universe to worry about. Like I remember I couldn't get 10 ahead on Avengers because there was so many other elements to the Marvel universe that it's a waste of my time to like write so far ahead and then have to deal with, oh, Wolverine's dead. Shit, I should have known that.
Right, sure.
So we were able to go nuts, and that's when Bill Jemas said, "Hey, why don't we double ship them? See what the market is for it. See if people are into it." And people got really into it. The sales went up when we double shipped, and now everyone double ships no matter whether they have it or not.
Right, exactly.
And we genuinely had issues in the can to double ship. Yeah. That's a different thing than mostly what happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's amazing because he's a really good, solid, great artist. And yet he's super fast, and that is not a thing super that fast. You like. Who's like that anymore? There
was a couple years in my life where I was working at the same time with Bagley and Romita Jr., and I would feel like I was being chased. Like I would write a whole issue of a comic, hand it in, go to sleep, wake up, and it was done. Like, I got it in a week. Like literally, it was like, and I'm doing this right now with John Romita. He is insanely good and fast. Just knows exactly where to put those lines. Yeah. And so every issue of Action Comics is coming in early, and I'm like, it's a bit of a panic for me.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that working with Bagley, like, changed your writing as well because of that freneticness, right? Yeah. Well,
a few things. And number one, it was I was going from again. He was the one that said, "Hey, stop drawing these books." Yeah. He said it was again. That's my job. I'm like, oh, and him being nice about it made it so much worse. Like if he would have called up and yelled at me, I would have been like, "You're totally right." But him going, "Hey, buddy," I was like, "Oh," I was shaming my whole family. And then I remember calling other artists and going, "Are these layouts annoying you?" And I'm like, "Well, not annoying." Yeah, which is like they'd rather not. So I stopped immediately. So Bagley was insanely helpful to me becoming a mainstream collaborator, graduating from indie shithead to mainstream collaborator. And then I became addicted to it. Now, if you want to know why so much gets done, it's because I am flat out addicted to it. Hence, that's where Ultimate Marvel Team Up came from. Yeah. Ooh, let me find all my favorite people and collaborate with them now that I know how to do it. And yeah, so it was that. And also at the same time, I was discovering the Bagley in that like issue 13 of Ultimate Spider-Man when Peter reveals his truth to Mary Jane. Like that wasn't in the original documents that we were going to try that. The characters had gotten there in my head. Yeah. And I was seeing Bagley in a different light than I originally saw him. And I said, hey, you know what Mark Bagley can do that no one ever lets him do? A bottle issue that takes place literally at the foot of a bed, two people just talking. Yeah. And he killed it. Yeah. He killed it. And no one ever saw Bagley the same way again.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. The transition from doing, where you're drawing out the book to writing scripts, did you start
I was still drawing out the book. I was not showing it to
Okay. Did it streamline your scripting, or like what was that process like? That sort of that interim process where you're between those two states.
You get to a place where you have like a shorthand language, and that's I have and I definitely with like Mike Oeming and Mark Bagley. Like you'll see, like there's certain scripts of Powers where I'll be like, oh, that is a shorthand script. That is. You two had a conversation that went on for hours about this as well, and then you go through waves where you're double writing, you're overwriting because you're like, okay, I want to make sure that Mark has all the subtext from every angle he could possibly see, and I'm doing that right now with Ryan Sook on Legion, where the scripts are like 40 to 60 pages long, which is way too long. But there's so much to talk about that I don't know what to cut, right? And no one sees it but him. It's just a note to him. But it's So sometimes that shorthand can actually become a longhand because you went to the next level.
Yeah. Are do your scripts read like screenplays?
Closer than most, but not exactly. Like I know what a screenplay reads like, and screenplays are just supposed to have action and dialogue and nothing else. You're not supposed to describe anything unless it is a plot point. It is a blueprint for 60 people to do their job in the most basic way. I mean, I know there's a million different things, but in comic books, and also screenplays have a format of which you cannot journey out. And if you break away from the format, you were just seen as someone who doesn't know how to do it, and they throw it in the garbage. With comics, there's no universal format. It doesn't exist. It's whatever you cobble together. So people can read like a Mark Waid script or a Roger Stern script or an Alan Moore script, and they're completely different, but get the same awesome results. Yeah. So I found that, it was a mixture of style things that I liked in other people's scripts. And also I work on the program Final Draft, which is a screenwriting program. I use it because it prompts you to keep writing and remembers all of your locations and character names. Like once you type in the word Superman, that's the only time I have to type it in. It remembers that that's the character, right? Yeah. So that lights up. And so in doing so, it looks like a screenplay. But in that format of the screenplay, I go anywhere I want or do anything I can do, including links to references and film clips and paintings that might inspire, and talking about subtext and talking about things that we're building towards and other issues that you would never do in a screenplay. But anything you want to write that helps, anything that helps your collaborators get to where they need to go is what I do.
Yeah. One of the big things about Ultimate Spider-Man is there's no thought balloons. It's all dialogue. And traditionally comics were not all thought balloons, but it was a lot of comics used to have a lot of captions and a lot of internal monologue. Particularly Spider-Man, right? I mean, when I think about all of my favorite, early Spider-Mans, it's I've got to get the medicine home to Aunt May, and I've got to push. I have to do it. I must do it. That doesn't work in dialogue. And so talk about that a little bit, maybe? Just that change?
Some of it was just my snotty, independent comic book brain thinking that there are certain tropes of mainstream comics that should be killed. That all of mainstream everything has elevated, and some of the language of comics was still very dated. Like they were still doing the same things they did. Like a film from the 1940s does not look the same as it does today, right? Yeah. Why would comics still look and feel the same? Also, and again, this is not a slight to any writer that came before me, because a lot of them are writing in a different mindset than I was. I was writing knowing the trade was coming. A lot of these people did not know there was ever going to be a reprint ever. Like we were, me and Fraction a couple months ago were laughing. He was sending me a bunch of Jimmy Olsen stuff from the 50s that they never thought would still be in print today. Like there's nobody thought this stuff was going to still be alive. So, but we do. We know this stuff. Like here we are 20 years later talking about it. So I wrote it thinking about the long-term haul. Yeah. And also thinking about what could be turning off new readers, and maybe a 75-line word balloon of Wolverine telling you everything that ever happened to him before he got to this moment as he's slicing 8 ninjas might be it.
Sure.
Maybe these characters need to live in the moment a little more. Yeah. And again, I mean, no disrespect to like Roy Thomas or anything, but Roy was the first writer that came in and thought it was his job to keep the continuity in continuity, and the only way you could do it is to repeat the continuity. Sure. Right. Sure. And he's talked about this endlessly in interviews, right? Sure. So that's not our job anymore. Like that was the job back then, because you need to go find these old issues if you ever want to find out what happened. Now there's many ways for you to find out what happened. So we can just stay in the moment. And in the moment comes a great deal more power and a great deal more truth.
Yes.
And in every great TV show, movie, book, the characters are in the moment.
Yes.
So that was the, and then if we're stopping to have thought balloons, we're now out of the moment.
Yeah.
Right. So I made sure, but at the same time, he is talking to you. We're with him. He is expressing his feelings to you in a monologue and a narration. So that kind of gets rid of the. So I'm still doing thought balloons, but we're doing them in a much more involving you way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. But I think that it changed the fundamental nature of the periodical and the audience's relationship with the periodical. And I have two thoughts on that. I mean, obviously, one was there was the shooter rule of every issue it has to be someone's first issue, right?
I agree. That's a Stan rule.
Okay.
Stan Lee said every comic is someone's first or someone's last, right? And both of those are your fault.
Yeah. And but I think one of the things that happened is a lot of people came behind you and went, "Hey, Brian's really successful at doing, what we now call decompressed storytelling. That's what I should do," without maybe understanding the fundamentals of it, or without giving enough content within an individual issue. And I think that to a degree, that's one of the things that made a certain percentage of the audience get frustrated with mainstream superhero comics. And I'm just wondering if you feel...
I see it a little differently. I think I don't think I'm alone in I don't think I'm alone in trying this. I remember very clearly, like Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka and quite a few other writers heading down a more mature path with the tools needed to tell their story the way it needed. Mark Miller as well. And so there was a bunch of us at the same time doing everything we can to kind of elevate the conversation. And I do feel we brought a lot of people back. It felt like for a while, for a good long time. So
yeah. No, I mean it's more the people of lesser craft misusing the tool, I suppose. It's very much like Alan Moore. Once Alan Moore came out, then everybody started having one page end with the caption, and then it continued on to the next page.
I still do that.
But a lot of people did it really, really badly, kind of artificially, right? It didn't read right.
I get such satisfaction out of Alan Moore page turn, particularly like Prometheus, where it's like you turn the page and page 2 and 3 are a spread. Yeah. Right. I love it so much as a reader that I know I keep stealing it, but I don't know how not to. But what you're speaking of, it's all that happens in every way of pop culture, in every shape or form. I mean, we were just talking about all the artists that were imitating Jim and Rob. Yeah. Because that's what they thought people wanted without realizing, no, they just want it for Jim and Rob, right? Yeah. And so that it always happens in comics. And it happens in movies and TV shows and music. Well, all of a sudden everything sounds like that song that was a hit. Right. So I think it's what I and a lot of other creators like to do is kind of like gently point where the lesson you're trying to learn a lesson from me. The lesson's actually in the failure. Right. It's actually not in the win. Go look at where I fucked up and learn from that. That's what you want to learn from. Yeah. So I'm with you there, but I was one of those people too. I mean, everyone does it. You got, and some people it's just a phase, like Bill Sienkiewicz and Neil Adams. Like it's a phase. Sure. And some people it's a phase they never break out of and they disappear. Yeah. 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 So you spoke about the page turn. Talk about the page turn and just sort of the importance of the page turn in comics, because it's works. We were talking about screenplay, right? Right. A screenplay is just something that proceeds at one speed and it's that. But
in comics, you control a lot of the world through the page turn.
Well, yeah, I mean, I get this another Stan quote that someone, it was Stan and Jack said, we're in the cliffhanger business.
Yeah.
And then someone said something, it doesn't even matter what's on page 10. It's what matters on page 22. And I have delighted myself endlessly by getting certain people to pick up my book, even though they think they hate me because I got them at the cliffhanger. And I'm sure you've had that conversation in your store about me. Absolutely. And that's delightful to me. I then, if I can say, having studied the Alan Moore cliffhangers and the Mark Waid ones, Mark Waid's another amazing cliffhanger writer, and the only one that cops to and has said publicly that he'll sometimes do a cliffhanger and have no plan. Like, I don't know how I'm getting out of it either. So I know you can't guess how I'm getting out of this because I don't know how I'm getting out of this. Yeah. I find that to be very inspiring. I find that for me, I have to know how I'm getting out of it before I hand it in, even if I didn't know when I started. But I added to my Alan Moore. I stood on his shoulders and said, well, actually, what about this? What if it does matter what's on page 10? What if there's a cliffhanger at the end of every page?
Yeah.
What if it's 22 cliffhangers? Isn't that exciting? And so I do that. And sometimes they're minor cliffhangers, character cliffhangers, action cliffhangers. You'll see a lot of, what's that? Turn the page, you'll find out. Those are all done specifically to make the page turn fun.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it. And then I remember around the time I was like 2 or 3 years in Ultimate Spider-Man, my wife was binging 24. She was pregnant and she was binging 24 live. It was back when they would just run all 24 episodes on TV. Like there was no, like she was watching them all. And I realized that the show 24 had a double cliffhanger. They had a physical cliffhanger where Kiefer Sutherland is hanging off of something, right? He's going to die. And then there was a good-dung, 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 and then an emotional cliffhanger, something with the wife or the daughter. There was 2 cliffhangers. And I went, that's it. I'm double cliffhanger dude. That's me. And some of it was about my stress about people spending money on comics. I just wanted to really make sure that I was doing everything I could to make that experience delightful and full of stuff. So, and a lot of this stuff I wouldn't talk about for years. I wanted it to be the secret sauce. I wanted it to be, and until I started teaching, and then also figuring out, oh, it's working. I should share with people that I am manipulating you at the highest level, but I'm doing so with good heart. So yeah, 22 cliffhangers and a double cliffhanger at the end.
Yeah. Jordan says we got another question. Miranda, hi Miranda. Do your kids enjoy comics? If so, what are their favorites, and do the things they enjoy about comics impact how you approach your comics?
They absolutely all do. Number one, I get a lot of free comics. I have for many years. Also, DC is with the comps. So my kids always get the YA ones before anybody else. And I'm actually have been almost 100% with my daughter came up to me with the Raven one and said, this is a hit. And she was like, before anyone had read it. And she was right. She's been right every time. She's always, and then I call DC and I said, my kid loved Raven. And now it's become like let's see which one's the winner. The Lois Lane one was a big hit this week too. So my son, so my daughters have all loved them and enjoyed them. Like my daughter made one with me. She's more into like making stories herself, and she's a musician, so she really liked it. My daughters Sabrina and Tabitha love graphic novels. Sabrina loves Lumberjanes. In fact, we just came back from Cosmic Monkey, where we bought volumes 14 and 15, and she was just beside herself that she gets to curl up tonight with 2 volumes. Oh my God, it was so exciting. So, but my son, who is the 7-year-old version of me, this has become me literally talking to my younger self about what I'm doing, and nothing was fun. So he loves Captain Underpants and deeply loves DC Comics, and I know it has a lot to do with it. They're just everywhere they're all over the place. So how would you not love them? But two things that were funny about that. Number one, like I stay up all night. His room's right over there. And I stay up all night typing. And for the first time ever, about a month ago, he came up to me, sat down right in my room, he goes, all right, tell me what you wrote. Let me see what it is. And then he wrote, and it says, Clark kisses Lois. And he goes, Dad, no one wants to read all this kissing you do. It's too much with the kissing. And walked away. And I thought that was the first time he'd ever done that. It was hilarious. And then, but he's an excellent sounding board. I have gotten full into Captain Underpants because of him, and see what a brilliant comic that is. And it really is. It does not get enough credit, other than it's the biggest hit comic of all time. But it's genuinely good. It's a genuinely good comic that's inspiring. So all of that is a lot of fun for me. And just, I'm like working on a new DC book now, another franchise that I'll start after I'm done with Superman. And I am building it with him. I am literally like casting who is in it and talking it through, and we're having the best time.
That's amazing. That's great. That's really
also,
great.
The other funny thing is, because we're all on Zoom and everything, and we've been stuck here forever, he just recently realized that his other friends don't have 1 million comic books in their house. Like my son will never be bored. Right? Like we just pulled out the Amalgam universe. Right. Holy shit. He doesn't know that other kids don't know about the Amalgam universe.
Yeah.
Like can you believe it's a Spider-Man, Spider-Boy? He's beyond, and he has no one to talk to about it. Like other than Sam Humphries. He has no one to talk to about it. So he was on a Zoom call with a friend, and he goes, well, what books are you reading? He goes, oh, we don't have any more books. He goes, you don't have 1 million copies of, he didn't know. He thought this was normal life.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. That's neat. Also, I just want to say as a sidebar, I'm actually kind of excited that you shop at Cosmic Monkey. Portland's the only other town in San Francisco I could ever see myself living in, and Andy's store is the store that I would shop in if I lived there by far. Which is literally the greatest compliment I could give anybody. I would shop at your store. But I also want to shout out to Andy and Cosmic Monkey. That is such a fine comic shop.
Yeah, they're so great and they're so kind to me. But I say what you will do, like most people in Portland, we shop at all of the comic stores because they're all awesome. Excalibur, they all have a different flavor. They all have different specialties. Sure. But Things from Another World and Excalibur and Cosmic and they're all amazing, and we all often shop at all of them. Yeah. Sometimes doing like a beer run. And there was one time where I bumped into David Walker at 3 different comic stores in the same day. And we didn't tell each other we were going to well, see you later. Okay, I'll call you tonight. And then go to Excalibur. Oh, you were looking for the thing they didn't have at Cosmic Monkey too.
Oh, that's great.
But I will say that it's the downside of it is that we live in a comic book utopia. Portland is a comic book utopia.
Yes.
Filled to the rim with hundreds of your favorite comic creators, and a lot of us are pals, and the stores are all A+.
They really are. There's no one that isn't great, and I forget that's not what the rest of the world is like. Sure. You forget there's some people who are, my store didn't order your book, so I can't have your book. Right.
It's a bummer.
Yeah, sure is. Another question, Jordan? How would a Spider-Man reboot today be different than Ultimate Spider-Man besides the obvious technological, cultural changes?
You know what? It's funny. It's an excellent question, and it's where Miles Morales came from.
Yeah.
Even though that was 10 years ago, that was the conversation we were having. We were like, okay, this is very successful. What did we do wrong? What did we miss? What could we have done better? What should we have been reaching for that we're not having? And it was the conversation about representation. And if you break down the building blocks of Spider-Man's origin, the Caucasian part doesn't really fit as well as it would today. Yeah. And that's the conversation that brought us Miles Morales. So I'm hoping they will have the conversation again sometime, because every time they do, something amazing comes out of it. Yeah. Like Spider-Verse, not the movie, Dan Slott's entire and Nick Lowe, and I have to mention Nick Lowe because I had a front row seat to watching Nick Lowe edit at sometimes 8 different spider themed books, and all of them be different, and all of them empower each other. And when I was doing Ultimate Spider-Man, there was a lot of conversation if the world could handle 2 monthly Spider-Man books of different continuity.
Yep.
Like that was the conversation. Like, and we went from that to 10. Yeah. So I hope they keep building and building and building. And I think the Spider-Verse 2, the movie, will be helpful in that regard as well.
Yeah. So this is a good segue to modern times. Obviously, and I'm really enjoying this conversation, but I am starting to flag at this point. I feel like we could probably
You tell me when you're done.
I know I want to do this. Everything's in flux right now. I mean, obviously we had horrible news, yesterday. A lot of really fantastic people are losing their jobs. I think it's pretty obvious that the company at DC is going to change dramatically in terms of how and what they publish. I'm expecting at least somewhat similar changes for Marvel because the audience is changing and the way that we're consuming comics are changing. And I wonder what your thoughts are on this, particularly in light of, sort of traditionally the way that authors make money in comics is by writing for comics, right? Like writing a comic a week, right? Like once you become big, that's how you make your living, right? You're always got irons in the fire. It's always happening. And it seems to me that the next 2 to 3 years is going to be greatly reduced opportunities for serialized comics for a lot of people. And I sort of wonder what your thoughts are about this.
Well, my thoughts are incomplete at the moment because we're literally still dealing with it. So you'll forgive if I don't have a real solid answer. I'm very upset about who was let go. They're really good people, and I know sometimes from my history in comics that some of the audience looks at everything in comics like they're comic characters. Like I'm some like evil wrestler to some people. I'm a good wrestler to other people, but people don't see us as humans sometimes. And if they didn't get what they wanted in their monthly comic that month, and somebody got fired, they're like, "Ha, good." I'm like, "No, it's not good.
It's not good.
They're good people, and they really, really care. There's nobody in comics who's in comics that doesn't care in the deepest part of their soul and love these characters on a level that for some of more casual readers would be shocked by." Brian Cunningham being the one that pops to mind from the list from yesterday. So I'm upset about it. But as far as and the industry will flux and change, and I've been through a few of them. So we'll see what this one brings out. A lot of the times for the better, even though there's some, the bankruptcy at Marvel was really horrible, and then they figured it out. Hopefully that's what will happen here. And I hate to be cup half full all the time, but I kind of have no choice in the matter.
Sure.
I will say for the creative community, I have a different opinion. We make our own opportunity. Like even if we end up in a world where there's less monthly comics, well, there might be less monthly mainstream comics. I don't know if that means like anyone can make any comic they want.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be from Marvel or DC. And in fact, there's a great deal audience of which you have recently just flowcharted that most of the audience does not see Marvel and DC as the mainstream.
Yep.
So we'll see what happens. But most people in comics were pivoting towards graphic novels and different types of distribution ways to get their work into the hands of people that doesn't involve what we consider to be the comic book industry.
Yeah, and I just think that
it's all the comic book industry, and I'm very interested to see where all that lands. But the people who make comics for a living, we do not rely on corporations to tell us it's okay to do it.
Sure. Yeah. I just think that it, in a lot of ways, it changes the trajectory of people's careers to do book format stuff, just because the production time becomes that much longer, right? Like one of the ways that comics works is because every 52 weeks a year, there are new comics. And there's lots of new comics on the stand. And being in front of that audience, potentially 52 weeks a year, certainly in your case, you almost always have a comic on the stand almost every single week. It keeps your name out there. It keeps it alive. And so, much as I am concerned in a way that we are graduating all of these new cartoonists every year and then putting them into the graphic novel field where it's harder for them to build their career, I think. That's my fear, at least, is that it's going to be harder for them to find the tools and find the pathway so they can build their audience. Because in my mind, the best possible thing that a creator can do is to build their audience, right?
Yeah.
Not to build Marvel or DC's audience, but to build the people who are, I like this creator and I'm going to follow him no matter what he or she does or where they go. Yeah, and particularly because you're teaching comics, I wonder if you have the same concerns.
Well, here's my thought on the overall on that particular subject, and I witnessed this as I teach writing at Portland State University, going back this year as well, in some regard, if there's classrooms, and in there it's, and I think Fraction actually pointed it out that when we started teaching, there was a lot of people who you could see they wanted to grow up and be Mark Millar. Like that was the goal. I want to be Mark Millar. And then they wanted to be Robert Kirkman.
Right.
Right. Whatever that is, I want to be that. Right. This generation wants to be Raina.
Yeah.
Raina and that is the goal. So the goal for the classroom has shifted. And as I watch the classroom goal shifted, so then, even though that's anecdotal, so does the entirety of the industry. So it's hard not to look at this little pocket classroom as a look into what's coming in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think that one of the concerns is, and I see this through doing the book scan numbers, right? That the overwhelming majority of graphic novels really don't sell, right? There's so many books.
Books too, regular books as well.
Well, no, absolutely. But I mean, I see a lot of these kids and doing great. I mean, doing fantastic work, and they're probably not earning out their advance, and so they're ending up doing comics at minimum wage or less, and so I'm afraid that the opportunities to be able to quit your day job and do comics full time are, despite the fact that Raina and Dave Pilkey are making huge sums of money and have enormous print runs, I think that the messaging it's harder sometimes. I don't mean to be a pessimist here. It's a thing I worry about, because that's where I think that we're in this golden age, in this fantastic golden age where comics have never been better, ever, in the whole history of the medium. And every week there are exciting, thrilling, fundamental projects coming out. I mean, that's why we have these graphic novel of the month clubs. It's literally why we do this. And but every other book that doesn't make it into sort of those 3 or 5 or 7, it's harder.
I bought this.
Yeah, nice.
I bought this.
Yep, great book.
This. And these are
book.
Actually, like in 1 week, one Wednesday. This is that's not even any Marvel or DC. And look at the quality of stuff that's coming out every week. Every week. So that's why I'm not as pessimistic. Now, listen, you're right to be pessimistic. There's a lot of blood in the water. You're in recovery during a pandemic. That this industry was not built to survive.
Right.
It absolutely was not. And it's very, very frustrating, because you and I have both watched people not listen to better heads. And some of this shit could have been fixed 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and was not. And now here we are. Yeah. And much like Obama got up and warned us the pandemic was coming, many of us saw this coming. Yeah. Right. And very, not in this exact form.
Absolutely.
Very aware of how fragile this marketplace can be,
and how special it is, and how
special it is, and how special the audience is, and how special the people that come in love it more than people who love anything else.
Yeah.
Right. You see the passion for comics and the comic book readers, and you see like gamers and their passion.
Yeah.
I love the comic passion. It's more pure and intimate and about their truth, you know. So I am not pessimistic because of that. Because like Jimmy Palmiotti tweeted yesterday, he goes, nothing's going to stop this bunch of people from making comics.
Yeah.
We'll figure a way. So, and again, no one has even hinted that Marvel and DC are stopping making comics. That has not happened. In fact, the opposite has been going on behind the scenes. But in worry, which you should, I don't because I know there are generations of creators that will just get to work.
Right. Okay. Good. Good. No, that's a good optimistic place to leave it.
Marvel bankruptcy. We both thought that was it.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of things like that where we thought, oh well, that's it. That's the end of the road, and it wasn't at all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So I hope I'm right.
But I know for me, it's not that. I'm not worried about comics as medium. I'm not even worried about my store, right? Because my store is a graphic novel store, and we have been for a decade. We're positioned to do this thing, you know. But I worry about AT&T and Disney not getting it. That's what I worry about, and someone just going, we don't think that the numbers matter anymore, you know. That we, you know, and I see a path coming where, you know, it's going to be a lot harder for a lot of things to happen. But I wanted to end on your optimism rather than Brian being a cynical.
You won't let it happen. But well, here's what I'll say. And again, I don't have all the pieces. I have not talked to all the players. Yeah. But there are enough good things happening behind the scenes that makes me not as pessimistic as you have the right to be at this moment. All right. There are smart people making some smart choices. Yeah. And
it's different on my side of the table. You understand.
100%. And also, I tend to think that the real power is in the hands of the creators. That it's up to us to do good work, and in lies there, and that has not changed at all. Yep. And if shit hits the fan, and again, no shit has hit any fan like that. If it does, we'll be ready.
Yeah.
I can always write and draw my books.
Yeah.
It's always in my back pocket. It's always there.
Yeah. Right? No, that's fantastic. Brian, I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate this and your generosity of time. And again, if I wasn't feeling weak, I easily feel like we could go for a third hour and neither of us would notice it, because
I literally did not realize we were talking this long.
It's been 2 hours. Yeah, it's insane. Yeah. No. I want to have you back at some point. Well, you know, we'll pick another of your books and we'll pick this up where we left off. So I want to thank Brian Michael Bendis. The book this month was Ultimate Spider-Man: Power and Responsibility. If you're watching at home, you know, this is our club. We do this every month. We pick great books. Next month, we're talking to Robert Kirkman for Walking Dead. Right. And we've got a club that also is picking brand new books every month. We've got a kids club every month. And we'd love it if you, the audience who are watching this, would join and help support the store and help support our ability to bring the medium to you. I want to thank Brian. I want to thank Jordan for doing.
Can I thank?
Please.
So throughout this whole shitty pandemic, almost every hour there's been someone binging Ultimate Spider-Man or New Avengers, like just using the time to read and sharing that love. I didn't want it to be this way, but it's so heartwarming and that's why I'm a little less pessimistic. It's this constant flow of people sharing energy through story. Yeah. That's all it's about, and that's not going away. That's accentuating. Yes. That's more so. And I know when this is over, which is not going to be anytime soon, people will go back to the frolicking outside. But this time we're spending together through story has been amazing, and thank you for sharing it with me.
Yeah, no, my absolute pleasure. So I was wrapping up my thank yous. Oh, I want to thank The Beat. Always got to thank The Beat for being our sponsor and sponsoring this. And I want to thank all of our members at home Like PBS said, we couldn't do it without viewers like you. Thank you so much. We'll see you next month with Robert Kirkman, or we'll see you next Wednesday with Adrian Tomine, who's here for Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist. Or the Kids Club later in the month, which is the Nixie of Mill Pond. So it's a great month of books, and we'll see you, and thank you, and I wish I wasn't so tired from this heart attack.
No, you did great. It's enough of us. That's plenty.
I love you all. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.